But let's dive right into the Loire and some go-tos beyond the usual suspects for Sauvignon Blanc. So we're going to explore some exciting new developments as Sauvignon Blanc and how we define it expands into the US market. We're going to see that this is a reflection of the river itself, of its soils and terroirs, and this will give us an idea of the connection between the vineyards, the winemakers, and all of the things that we hold dear about this lovely river. So let's get started. Okay. We are going to I'm just trying, hi. Here we are. So let's just do a very brief review of the main regions. So as you can see, we have the Loire region up in that northwest corner. And one thing that's interesting about this, in the Northern Hemisphere, in the wine belt of 30 to 50 degrees, we are at 47 degrees. So that is right east of Chablis, if you were going towards the east. And if you're going to where we are right now, I am in New York, 47 degrees is where the Finger Lakes are, the Finger Lakes AVA. So that's kind of a nice little thing. But the first three are the largest. We have Bordeaux at the top with the most vineyard size. Then we have Languedoc-Roussillon, and then we have Loire Valley third. It's the third largest AOP in France. So now we have the river here, and you can see it's set out in 4 different sections. The Loire River is the longest river in France, the second being the Seine. It's also the last wild river in Europe. This is a river that starts only about 85 miles from the Mediterranean Sea. It starts in the Auvergne region in the south of the Massif Central. But let's go from left to right. So the first region is the Nantais, and this is where you will find Muscadet and now some of the new kind of exciting things that they're doing in Muscadet with the Cru Communaux, which there are now 10. And these are defined by the different types of soil. So you get to see the diversity of soils that you find in the West, and it highlights the climate that we have here, which is that oceanic climate. And then we're moving right to Anjou-Saumur, which holds that point where we're still in the oceanic climate, but we're reaching inland. We also have a rain shade of the Mauges Mountains, which are underneath Saumur. So this is an area where in the southern part on the left bank of the river, you still have cool climate, but you have really beautiful sunny days, and you have the moderating effects of all of those beautiful tributaries. And then today, of course, we're going to focus on the Touraine, which is an area where we are highlighting and showcasing Sauvignon Blanc. And then just for reference, we have the Centre Loire, where we have Sancerre and Pouilly-Fumé, and that is right in the middle of the Paris Basin. And it's also the center of France. And so now let's talk about the watershed. One of the interesting things about this particular area is that it covers 1/5 of the French territory. The Loire and its tributaries plays an important part in terms of the culture, the food, and transportation. Basically, this river was the superhighway from the Middle Ages on to the French Renaissance. So now we have what I like to call the most delicious, drinkable Oreo double stuffed cookie of all. You have the Massif Marquin, which is volcanic soils to the west. You have the Paris Basin, of which you have Anjou, Saumur, Touraine, and then you have the Massif Central, which is also volcanic soils. The volcanic soils that you find in the Massif Américain, Muscadet-Sèvres region are igneous rocks, gneiss, mica schist, greenstone, gabbro, and you see a lot of the Cru Camino are highlighting those particular soils. And then we're moving west to Anjou. That soil is mostly schist and sandstone. All of those beautiful black soils, those are mostly on, you have two areas of Anjou, Anjou Noir and Anjou Blanc. And you can tell that it's Anjou Blanc as it moves towards the tuffeau soils closer to Saumur. Saumur is that beautiful tuffeau that you see, both underground in the vineyards and the terroir, and you also see that in terms of the chateau. All of those beautiful caves, the troglodytes, is now the area of mushrooms, truffles, and the French resistance. Moving on to Touraine, there is an east coast and a west coast in terms of the battle of the soils. In the west, you have siliceous clay with sand, and to the east, you have calcareous clay slopes with light gravel. And then you have, at the absolute eastern end of Touraine, you have some of that Kimmeridgian clay that you find right in the middle of the Central Loire, which is Kimmeridgian limestone. This is the same soil. This is the Paris Basin. So we're talking about the soils that go all the way up to the Dover Hills in England. And then you find a little bit of flint and gravel as well. And then in the south, you have another type of volcanic soils. You have the mica schists, sandstone, and granite. So now we get to the oceanic influences. So we are going from west to east. One of the kind of interesting things is you have the moderate, this is a pretty cool climate. We're at the top of the latitude in terms of wine producing regions. But some of this warm air that retains heat and moisture is coming from the Gulf Stream. And so that is affecting that big port right in Nantes. As you go towards the west, you start to get a buffer effect by some of the hills and some of the topography. So you're going to a semi-maritime climate. Like for instance, that lower arrow, blue arrow, right above Poitiers, that's Poitou. That area, there is a range of mountains called the Mauges Mountains, which acts as a rain shadow. So it's a very sunny place. So you get really rich, ripe fruit. And then you go into the semi-continental climate, where you have cold winters and then you have warm, hot, sunny summers. And so you're getting lots of sunshine, but also you're getting the moderating effects of the river and all of the tributaries. And then you go straight into a continental climate as you start to go towards Sancerre. One thing to note that shift at Orléans, you also have quite a bit of forest. And this is an area that's not only great for wine, but it's also an area for dairy and grazing cattle. So now in terms of grape varieties, in the West, we have Melon Blanc and Folle Blanche. Two kind of interesting details is that in 1709, there was a big winter frost. And so, of course, Melon de Bourgogne, which is now we mostly call Melon Blanc, was planted because it's hardy for cold and it's resistant to disease and it can handle basically any type of weather. Folle Blanche, which is also called Gros Plan, was planted by the Dutch because this is an area where we have a lot of eau de vie wines. Moving into the east, we have, of course, one thing to note, Loire is the area where you have the introduction of Chenin Blanc and Cabernet Franc grapes. Then we have also Groslo, which is used mostly for rosés and as a blending partner for sparkling wine. We have Chardonnay, a little bit of Chardonnay. We have Haut, which is also called Malbec. That was one of the questions that was like an extra credit question when I was taking classes a long time ago. Of course, I pronounced it Cot because my 2 years of college French was failing me. And there's also pockets of Gamay as well. Of course, Philip the Bold, of course, banished Gamay from Burgundy, but there's still pockets of it planted in the Loire, where it's more than welcome. So now we are squarely in the Touraine, and Sauvignon Blanc is the most planted white grape. And then, of course, we have Pinot Noir. We have pockets of that. Just an interesting note, it was phylloxera which basically caused this change. After phylloxera, the area was mostly planted to Sauvignon Blanc, and the rows that we see instead of field blends, it was basically the birth of modern planting. Also, Sauvignon Blanc takes very well to American rootstock and to the cool climate. So this is just an idea of the dynamics of the grape varieties, but I'm just going to concentrate on the Sauvignon Blanc, which is 16%, only 16%, a small little percentage of the grapes of the Loire. About 31,660 hectares in France. This is a number that's increasing. It's increased by 84 hectares in the last 5 years, and part of that is the new rules for the Val de Loire, Vin de France, and also the fact that you can put Sauvignon Blanc on the label in some areas of Touraine. So Sauvignon Blanc as a grape. The grape profile, this is of course native to Loire. We all know that it is one of the parents with Cabernet Franc of Cabernet Sauvignon. So Sauvignon Blanc is the royalty of the Loire. It's known for its flavor profile, crispness, liveliness, fresh character. These three characters are basically showcased by this wonderful moderating effects of the river and its tributaries. One of my nicknames for all of the Touraine wines that are on the Cher River is basically, it reminds me of one of my favorite Stevie Wonder songs, Mon Chéri Amour. So this is something that I try to remember when I'm thinking about this particular area, as I think of how much I love the Cher River, and it's called the Cher River. Sauvignon Blanc is an early ripening grape. It produces dry wines. It can also produce a skin contact wine, and also produces sparkling wines. It's grown mainly in the eastern part of the Touraine. It's an aromatic variety. Some of the aromatics that we know of, the pyrazines, the green pepper, the bell pepper, the gooseberry, lemon, citrus. If the region is warmer, sunnier, less wind, you find more of the exotic fruits. You go to the guava, the passion fruit, and the pineapple. And in terms of food pairing, Sauvignon Blanc is so versatile. It was one of my go-tos when I worked on the floor. It goes well with Asian cuisine, anything that is spicy. It is a perfect foil for all of the vegetables, even the difficult ones that say no to everything. They say yes to artichokes, to white asparagus, green asparagus, ramps, all of the fresh herbs. It's a great foil. And so now we go to our first region. And one thing that's interesting about the Val de Loire is that this is across all 14 departments. And so this gives winemakers and producers a lot of flexibility in terms of what they'd like to do, in terms of their yield, in terms of what they'd like to plant or replant, to basically tailor their grapes and their vines to the terroir. The soil and the tributaries, it's like a diverse geological range. You have the mountains, you have chalk, you have volcanic soils, you have sedimentary soils, you have fossilized soils. So there's a lot going on, and you can get a lot of different flavor profiles from these different areas. And they make all types of wines, from sparkling to sweet wines. The total production is 250 hectoliters. That equals 33 million bottles, of which almost 1,263,000 bottles, you know what I'm saying, were imported to the US. 64% of the wines were white in this particular area, also sparkling, 8% red, mostly Cabernet Franc, 20%, and rosé 8%. And the area in production is 4,600 hectares. So now the Touraine, which is the star of the show. This is a pretty large region. 88% of the grapes are white, and that is mostly Sauvignon Blanc with some Chenin Blanc. We have rosé at 7%, red 5%, and sparkling 13%. But what we're going to concentrate on right now, you can see Bourgogne, Chinon, Côte de Loire, Jasner, which is strictly Chenin Blanc, Saint-Nicolas de Bourgogne, those are the reds and the rosés. We have Vouvray, which is 100% Chenin Blanc only. So if you see a Vouvray label, it's always 100% Chenin Blanc. But we are concentrating now on the Touraine. In 2011, 3 new AOPs were added, and that is, Chenonceaux, and then we have Oisly, and we have Jouet Noblet, which is another one that is concentrated mostly on rosé. So the production is between an average of over 550,000 hectoliters. This area, it's a large area, as you can see. It's on the main river, and then of course above on the Loire tributary, which is just the masculine representation of the Loire. And then 80% of this land, which is actually up to 85, is under organic farming or has some kind of environmental certification. On the bottles, you see Terra Vitis, you see Agent, AB, Agent Biologique. You will see HVE, or high value environmental. You will also see biodynamic farming. You'll see Demeter, you'll see Ecoserre, and a lot of labels have the Vigneron Indépendant on it because a lot of these areas are made up of independent winemakers. So in terms of the heritage, this area since 2000 is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. And part of that is that this is the Valley of the Kings. It was important for transporting goods. The river, it was basically a superhighway. And so we have all of your famous chateaux, Chinon, Azé, Les Rideaux, Amboise, and Chenonceaux. But we also have a vineyard of valleys. And this is all of the main tributaries, the Loire River, which is the main, the Vian, the Cher, the Indre, the Loire, the Cis, and the Boine. One thing that's interesting about this wild river, and it's called that because it is a naturally flowing river that has no canals or levees. It has levees, but it has no canals. The canals would come later. In fact, the canal of Breuer connects the Seine to the Loire, and there's also a canal at Orléans, which brings a lot of wines and goods into Paris. So now we are going to go to Haut Poitou. Haut Poitou, in terms of, if you look at this on the map, this is between the Thouet and the Vian tributaries, and it is also south. So this is still an area that has an oceanic or maritime climate. However, we do have those Mauges hills and mountains, which kind of act as a rain shade. So this area is very sunny. The soils are primarily clay and limestone. This is a major fault line. And so besides the fact that you have all of this clay and limestone, you have this beautiful Turonian white chalk. But you also have clays, you have fossilized oyster shells, you have some glacial soils, you have some sedimentary soils because of this fault line. In this particular area, the production is 6,500 hectoliters or 860,000 bottles. This area, mostly white with 83%, rosé 4%, area production 120 hectares. So we come to our first wine. One of the unfortunate problems we were having right now is the government shutdown. And so we were not able to get the kits out to folks who had signed up for a kit. In fact, I am going blind with these wines in just going by what I know of the region. And so what we can do later, all of these wines are available in the US, and we can go back to the video to taste, you know, once the kits arrive. It's a little bit of a time lag. So now this first line, we are in Haut Poitou. This is the Domaine de la Tour Beaumont. If you Google this particular region, this is one of the oldest producers. They are certified HEV or high environmental value. This is and they are also certified by Ecocer and Terravitas. And basically that's a sustainable program that involves not only just taking care of the land, but you take care of your water, you take care of the people, and you kind of take care of the culture and the traditions of the particular area. 100% Sauvignon Blanc, this is from the 2024 vintage. This one you'll see in terms of flavor profile, it's very fresh. This is an area where you're still having the winds off of the Atlantic Ocean, and so it's got a really beautiful, crisp, dry mineral quality. You get a little hint of white flower, but mostly you get this crisp citrus, almost melon quality, and it's just very racy, vibrant acidity. Next, we go to the Touraine PDO. And so this is a larger area. This is 200,000 hectoliters. And this appellation extends from Anjou to what we call the Gates of Solon. The Solon is on the eastern side of Touraine, underneath Orléans. This is a huge forest, and it actually has its own type of soil. There are 139 communes, and this is in between all of those beautiful, if you look closer at the mapping, you see all of the little tributaries, the Indre. So this is 100 communes in Indre et Loire and 39 in the Loire et Cher. And these are just all of the different tributaries in the area. One of the things about Touraine is that it has a famous soil. So we're all familiar with Kimmeridgian clay. However, Peruche, this is that flinty, chalky, gorgeous soil, or flinty clay, is the main star of Touraine. And then you find some sand in the eastern zone, and then light gravels as well as you get closer to the rivers. This is 64% white, 20% red, lightly sparkling, and then is 8% rosé, also 8%. Area and production is 4,100 hectares. Interspersed between this particular area, we're now getting into the continental climate. You have a lot of rolling hills, and you also have a lot of forest. So a lot of these vineyards are surrounded by trees, and that creates a little heat pocket. And so if you want a wine that has more rich flavors, I would focus on wines from Touraine. So now we come to the second wine, and we are actually going to taste two wines from this particular producer so we can see the difference between, well, we're not going to taste, but we're going to think about it. Or we're going to showcase the differences between the two. So we're going to do the Touraine PDO. So this is, they can source from any of their vineyards, of which, one second, I have some beautiful notes on this gorgeous wine. So this wine has been, this winery is founded in 1860. It is also certified by Ecocer and Terravitas. It is important to notice that one of the reasons why you have so much organic and biodynamic viticulture in the Loire is that you have the moderating effects of the river. And then also you have old traditions with producers that help with disease and all kinds of ways to help your soils and to have healthy vines. So for this particular wine, this one, They have a cellar that they keep naturally cool. It is underground. Their fermentation temperatures are fairly low. One of the things to note that's important for both Ecos and Terra Vitas is that if your fermentation temperatures are under 50 degrees, you don't have to use as much sulfur. And so this is important when you're talking about natural wines and natural winemaking. But this wine has really good body. They are sourcing from vineyards that get quite a bit of sun, so you get a lot of exotic fruit, you get lots of passion fruit, pineapple, as well as peach in terms of also with the soils. So now we're going to the third wine, which is Château de la Roche, also HEV certified. One of the things about this is we now have just a little bit of a different type of soil and a different type of area. This wine also has a really fine, almost nervy acidity to it. They block the mallow on this wine. And so even though it's got this beautiful rich texture from being aged on the lees, it's got this really kind of crushed stone characteristic that in terms of value and price, this is unbeatable. So put this on your map in terms of wines. This is good if you're introducing the Touraine to your guests or your clients. This is a good area to, if they're familiar with Pouilly Fumé, if they're familiar with Sancerre, if they're or Manitou Salon, which are very popular and the most prestigious areas that are in the Central Loire. But you can say this one, if you want to try something new and exciting that's similar to something that you're familiar with, this is a good way to go. And so now we're in Touraine, Oisly. And yes, I did have to Google that because I took 2 years of college French, and it said au revoir to me very soon when I started studying wine. So now we are in a small area that is actually in between and to the east of Tours, in between the Loire and the Cher River. And this is 10 communes, and it's called the heart of the Salon Viticole, because you have this large plateau, which is forested, and this is in between the Cher and the Loire. So this is a little bit of a protected microclimate. The soils here are sand and clay. And one thing about sandy soils, which is nice, is that they help with disease pressure. It's a soil that heats up during the day and then, of course, cools down at night. So you get nice diurnal shifts as well. But also phylloxera and a lot of the diseases do not like sand. So all of these sandy soils are helpful in terms of not using preparations. So it makes it easier for you to transition into organic and biodynamic viticulture. That's the only interesting that I have to say about that. So this area, total production, very small. This is also a new AOP. So this began in 2011. 2,900 hectoliters, 390,000 bottles, and this is 100% white. So you only find Sauvignon Blanc from this particular area. They are allowed to put this on the label. So some labels you'll see Touraine, Oisly, and it'll just have that, or you'll also see Sauvignon Blanc on the label. So now from this particular wine, we have a producer, and this is a Levy, the Ellipse, Domaine de l'Aubel, 100% Sauvignon Blanc. So now we have the sands of Salon, and this is that particular soil. One of the interesting facts about this, they are certified organic, and these are old vines, and so you get very concentrated fruit. This is if you look at their vinification notes, they're using stainless steel and they're using a long lees aging of 8 months to enhance the mineral culture of the mineral character of the wine. But one thing that this does have, it has almost a full body texture to it. But it has that beautiful long finish that's typical of Sauvignon Blanc. So in terms of richness, this one can handle your weightier, and you can think of it in terms of the area. You have more game here. You still have all of your freshwater seafoods, but you have some of your weightier seafood preparations. So now we go to Touraine Chenonceaux, named, of course, for the Chenonceaux Castle, which actually goes right over the river. Just a little bit of a historical note. The ballroom or the gallery that is above the river, that spans the river, that was actually something that Catherine de' Medici, the wife of Henry II, that was part of her history. And it's that chateau is important in terms of the French resistance during World War II. You could escape by running across that gallery from occupied France into the resistance. So that was kind of a cool detail when I Googled the chateau. Of course, I did not know this when I visited the chateau right out of college, because I was drinking things more of the Baileys on the rocks type of delicious beverages, because I was a young child who had not drunk all of the beautiful wines yet. But so now we are talking about an area that is now on both banks of the Cher. So this is 8 communes and 18 communes in the Loire and Cher. First 8 in the Indre and Loire. This is also small production, 7,800 hectoliters, 1 million bottles, 80% red, 80% white, 20% red. And this one is on slopes and hillsides. And so this is also on that soil called Perouche, which is that flinty clay. And so this has this distinct mineral quality to it. It's also denser in flavor and tends to have a savory aspect. So if you're looking for a Sauvignon Blanc that is really rich on the mid palate, also has a savory aspect to it. This is excellent with, of course, all of the mushrooms of the area. We're now talking game as well. Any of the charcuterie of the area, and of course, any of the goat cheeses that this region is famous for. So now we have wine number 5. This is Touraine Chenonceaux, 100% Sauvignon Blanc, of course. Also HVE. This is a wine which is going for their organic certification. Hold on, I have some really beautiful details that I want to tell you about this wine. And then it has, this was a winery that is now 6 generations. So this is Christophe Davot, who is the winemaker. And in terms of placement if you were to place this in your store or on a wine list, I would give the Touraine its own section, and then I would list the different subzones that you wanted to feature, but this would definitely be one that I would want to feature, because these wines tend to be very perfumed. They tend to be richly textured. They tend to be full-bodied. So if you want a full-bodied Sauvignon Blanc, you can look no further than Touraine Chenonceaux. But we have 2 wines from this particular AOP. We also have the second wine from Domaine de la Renaudie. One thing that you would notice, and this is basically like if some wines have a first and a second wine. This would be their Ludi or their cru wine or their Premier Cru, even though we don't have those classifications, but this would be theirs. This is a select site. This is an area where it is their best vines, some of their older vines. They are certified Terra Vitis. And the vineyard is actually called La Renaudie. So this is the Ludi of La Renaudie. So they do one thing before they start the fermentation is they separate that first free run juice before they press the grapes. So all of that weight and gravity of the grapes, they will take that juice and vinify it separately. And then those two different lots, the direct press and that free run juice are separate in stainless steel. And then that temperature is kept low again, and that's part of their environmental commitment to using no pesticides and that temperature. If you're under 50 degrees, you don't need to use so much sulfites. And then this wine is matured on the fine lees until April of after the harvest to give it that rich texture. And so now we have some really cool key facts about the area. Inter-Loire basically highlights some of the strong points of the Loire with all of the things that are important. So first is the symbiosis between the producers and the land. And I love the quotes, a strong link with the entire wine industry over a wide area of 14 departments from upstream to downstream. One thing that's interesting when you're looking at the river, we usually talk about it, and we talked about it today, from west to east, but literally the Loire River runs from the Mont de Gerbier, basically in Auvergne, close to the Rhone, from this volcanic mount, and then it goes up north. The Allier River joins at Nevers, and then it goes up through Central Loire, and then it takes this huge curve at Orléans and starts to go west towards the Atlantic Ocean. So it's basically like reading a manga comic book as opposed to reading books like we usually do. So that first area, like I said earlier, this is the first wine growing region to feature and showcase Melon Blanc and Cabernet Franc. 85% of the land is under organic farming and or environmental certification. What the vigneron would like to do is get that to 100% by 2030. This particular area of Chateau, almost to Anjou, is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. And this represents 2,000 years of viticulture. So this is quite a bit of history. Just a kind of cool part to notice, we have been talking about stainless steel vinification. This is a fairly modern way to produce the wines. We talk about this region and its history, but for most of the 16th through 18th century, from Muscadet with underground fermenters to mostly using wood casks for fermentation. One of the cool things about if you have underground tanks like you do in Muscadet, and then you do dotted all over the Touraine and also in Beaujolais, is that this is a natural temperature control. So before stainless steel, there were underground vats and cement tanks. So that was pretty amazing. In terms of products, France's top producer of white wines is the Loire. 255 million bottles are sold to 160 countries. That's 8 bottles per second. Whoever is doing this research, I want to meet this person. And I know it's a person. But one thing that's kind of interesting about this is there's a lot of attention on the Loire and the new rules since the pandemic. And since 2023, with the launch of Bloom Big, which showcases the diversity and the 4 Fs of the Loire, which is fresh, fruity, flavor, and fair. And fair represents all of the effort that the winemakers are making for organic and sustainable viticulture. 20% of these wines are exported out, and 36% of it is white, 19% red, 28% rosé, and that's across all rosés, both still and sparkling, and 17% sparkling. And then we have the actors. 1/5 of the estates are managed by women. One of the things that I forgot to mention is that the second and sixth wines, the winemaker is Charlotte Denis. So there are 2,200 wineries. There are 310 wine merchants, 16 cooperative cellars. And this, in terms of jobs, creates 29,000 direct jobs. And then it creates 15,000 part-time jobs, whether it be pruning, picking, harvest, all of the work that it takes to create this cycle of wine. Okay, now we come to some import figures. And this is Loire wines by volume in the US. As I get ready to take Diploma 2 wine business, these are the kind of numbers and statistics that I will be looking at in detail. But I have my notes here. The imports by volume, 65% of the imports are white at over 42,000 hectoliters by volume. 21% are red and rosé, and 14% are sparkling. That total volume, and this is in 2024, was a little over 6,500 hectoliters. The top 10 Loire wines by volume in 2024. 19% to Touraine, which is what we featured today. And then we have after that, but actually, if you look at the top 10, that is we have a lot of areas that are specifically in Touraine, if you're including Vouvray and you're including Val de Loire and Cremant de Loire. And then you go on to Muscadet at 11.6%. You have Chinon specifically, which is a 100% red region at Cabernet Franc, but there's some little pockets of Chenin Blanc at 7.5%. And then you have Cabernet and Rose d'Anjou at 5%. And then going down to Saumur and Saumur Champagny at 2.5%, and Bourgogne and Saint Nicolas de Bourgogne at 2%. One of the interesting things to think about is why Sauvignon Blanc was chosen after the scourge of phylloxera, is that it already had a prestigious reputation. It was easy to cultivate. It was early ripening, so it was perfect for this cool climate. And in this area that was planted mostly to red grapes, Sauvignon Blanc came in to save the day. Another nice fact about Sauvignon Blanc is that it took very well to American rootstock. So it was very easy to replant to Sauvignon Blanc. So these key figures. The total imports for the Loire imported to the US in 2024, and this is over 65,000 hectoliters. And this is basically an increase of 6.7 between 2023 and 2024. And I think in part to the fact that there were supply issues during the pandemic. And so as distributors reached out to new and different areas, the Loire was able to showcase the diversity of its regions, the affordability of a lot of these areas, which was always very popular And that basically is over 8 million bottles, and that is 41.7 million euros in value. And now, in terms of just Sauvignon Blanc, over 18,000 hectoliters were imported in 2024. This is 2.4 million bottles to a total of 11.4 million euros in total value. And details per PDO, Touraine PDO at the top, because this encompasses that entire area. Val de Loire next, at 58, a little over 5,800 hectoliters. Haut Poitou, both Haut Poitou and Val de Loire include Sauvignon Gris. And then you have the two new PDOs, Touraine Chenonceaux and Touraine Oisly PDO. And you're going to start to see these names a lot more on your labels as they gain more popularity, and they basically are distributed throughout the US. So we'd love to know about your opinion. We'd love for you to take this 2-minute survey to let us know what you thought about the information and the wines. And it would be good for us to share with the producers and let them know. I wanted to mention also that all of these wines are available in the US, and so you can go out and explore these different areas. So does anyone have any questions?
So we actually already have one for you.
Okay.
In terms of Chenin Blanc, have you noticed producers changing from wines with more residual sugar to drier wines?
That's an interesting question. I would say almost yes and no. I had the great privilege of pouring at New York's Governor's Island this summer, and we are featuring Vin de Loire. So this was an area where you had a great freedom to produce the kinds of wines that you want in terms of minerality and style. And so it ran the entire gamut. And of course, with Chenin Blanc, this is a grape where it can be racy, you know, high green fruit and melon to sweet wine. So basically, it was almost a middle ground. You saw a lot of, because I think that very dry style is very popular. However, Chenin Blanc really shows itself and its flavor profile really well if it's got a little bit of weight to it. So the wines that were most popular were the wines that had a little bit of residual sugar. And I think guests forget how much they love sugar. It just hits you, and then it finishes dry and clean.
Another question. What is the fastest growing Loire Sauvignon Blanc AOP as exported to the US? Has the growth of Sancerre crested?
I think what's happening with Sancerre is that it's a supply problem, supply and demand, and also price. Prices for Sancerre are going up. A lot of those wines are in allocated markets. I find that happens a lot in here in New York. Is a very little Sancerre trickles in, and it's almost sold out before you can even consider it for either your wine program in your store or your restaurant. So what's happening with a lot of buyers is they're looking towards other region. I think what I'm starting to see the most in terms of popularity is the Touraine subzones. I'm starting to see a lot of Touraine Chenonceaux. I'm starting to see a lot of Anjou Blanc, especially if you want a wine that has that mineral dry quality. But just an interesting note, because of the sandy soils of Touraine, Oisly, if you're looking for something that's kind of Sancerre adjacent, I would look for this new and upcoming region. And this would give you an opportunity to introduce this new area to your guest and have it be part of their experiences. Like, oh, I discovered this new area. It's kind of like, you know, the big names in Champagne, but then you find all of these little great family-owned grower champagnes, which you can afford. I would love to drink Georges Laval every day, but my bank account says, no, ma'am, you cannot do that. So there's a lot of small grower producers that fit my budget a little bit more, like every Cremant in the Loire Valley. Well, thank you very much. Please remember to share your experience. And I hope that you enjoyed this wonderful seminar. I learned so much just doing research on the wines and on the area. I learned an overload of information about plateaus. And yes, I did have to Google watershed and all of the different topography and geology elements. I would like to thank the Encyclopedia Britannica online for children for helping me through all of the science. So I hope you have a great day and go out and buy some great wines.